Welcome back to Startup Talk. I'm your host, the startup coach, founder of Toronto Starts, one of the largest startup communities in Canada. And with me today is Pat, founder of Lightster. Welcome, Pat.
Thanks, Greg. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And this is an interesting problem you're solving. So I want to jump right into it. Tell us about Lightster.
Yeah, we are a customer interviews on demand platform, which basically allows creators, so whoever's making products or services, find their target customers to speak to within 60 seconds. On the other hand, these customers that participate can also have an opportunity to earn $1 per minute for participating with the creators.
So as a person who is giving feedback, you get $1 per minute?
Yes.
Excellent. That's we're going to get into a little bit about that and how everything works in a bit. But I'd like to start off as the entrepreneur, what they were like growing up. I'm older, you're younger. So were you a handful for your parents? Were you studious? Were you into socializing, sports, music?
Yeah, I was certainly, I'd say, a bit isolated at home. I was always independent, wanting to do my own thing. So I'd say I was a handful to my parents, and I'm sure they would agree. In terms of the social circles, I think somewhere in between, very, very social, and then also kind of having my own time to do my own thing as well. And as always, where I grew up in Bangkok, Thailand. And as always, we always try to expose ourselves with, a lot of music and sports to try to see what we like. So I was involved in that as well. So I did, guitar, drums, piano, and got into singing. And that's something that I've been stuck to most recently.
Fabulous. That sounds wonderful. I thought the creative process, the music is very similar to entrepreneurship and creating companies, and there's some interesting tie-in. So it's nice that you have that background. Now, you said you grew up in Bangkok, but I know you're in Toronto now. What was your transition from Bangkok to here? Where did you go to school? How did all that happen?
Yeah, so I actually first landed in grade 11 in the eastern townships of Quebec, actually. So it was a very small community of about 200 in a boarding school there. So I'd say the transition was quite nice because I already went to an English school in Bangkok, and so language was never an issue for me. And the boarding school, the 2 years there really allowed me to integrate into the Canadian culture. And yeah, eventually moved to Ontario, went to school in Waterloo, and did a bunch of co-op terms there. So I always felt, looking back, that co-op was definitely the right way to go. I did, each co-op term at different companies doing very, very different things that, now I don't get a chance to anymore. So it was definitely great.
So where did you said you went to, I'm sorry, what school? Waterloo?
Yes, Waterloo.
And did you, when you want to run your own business, or did you want to work for somebody? Like, when did the entrepreneur bug strike you?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in an entrepreneur family. So my parents ran a business in Bangkok. And so I always felt that it was a given that eventually I would get into it. For me personally, it was just a matter of when I felt ready for it. Back in 2017, I did my MBA. I wrote my thesis based on Lightster, and I never really got around to execution until this year, where I, finally put the trigger and then got into it. So for me, it was just a matter of time.
So let's talk about where this idea came about. A young mind, you're thinking of all the different types of companies you can start. I work with entrepreneurs all the time. Why this company? Why this idea? Why customer interviews?
It's basically because I have lived both sides of the platform that I'm building for. So on the creator side, personally, I've been a product manager for as long as I remember. I've spent a good, 10 years in the space, and I've lived through the pain of not being able to talk to customers as often as I wanted to. Even though, during my journey, I went from, large companies into small companies, from banks into software, into digital agencies. It was always a consistent problem, regardless of where I went. And I was always after the mission to try to solve it once and for all. And on the other hand, I always felt that the innovation process and ecosystem was always an exclusive ecosystem where only people who work in the tech industry are able to kind of touch it and feel it and participate. And so I've always wanted to create an opportunity and leverage Lightster to actually open up the innovation ecosystem for everyone to participate. Because I came to a realization that while we are in our roles, right, whichever company we work for and whatever we do, we are essentially consumers of someone else, right? Like we all buy groceries, we all go to the mall. And so we are all potential participants, of these creators. So why not have a platform that's open for everyone?
It makes a lot of sense. And let's talk a little bit about, how hard is it to get customer interviews? Can't people just talk to the customers? I talk to startups all the time, so I know this, but I'd like to understand the pain that you see.
Yeah, there are solutions out there that allows you to find customers to talk to, but there is nothing that you can use to do it in an on-demand fashion, right? Like the best way that I would look at it and kind of describe it is before you get to like the first customer that you need to talk to, there is recruitment, right? Like you need to screen and come up with a criteria. Then you need to use either a platform, one of the existing ones, or like an agency to go out and find them. And then once you find them, you got to schedule them, you got to run the interviews, and then finally report on it. And so, all of that takes days at least, but on average, it's probably more around 2 to 3 weeks before you get in front of your first customer. And then once you get the reports back, you got to do it all over again, and you might have run out of money in doing so. And so that is exactly what Lightster aims to solve. Right. So the moment you want to talk to a customer, well, there they are, right? You can look at them, you can just launch a call with them right away and just get the feedback. Another good way to look at it is, what the world was like before LinkedIn and Facebook was around. Like if we think about that for a second, and think about how much time did it take us to get connected with others in our network, whether it's personal or professional. Like why hasn't the same been done to customers and creators? The success of products are due to the customers buying them and using them on a regular basis. So I always thought about Lightster bringing that wall down and virtually putting customers on the creators team.
Now, I always found that entrepreneurs, startups, they don't actually even know how to interview, never mind the process of finding them, getting in front of them.
Right.
But what questions to ask. Now, do you have some advice there? Do you help your customers to try and figure some of that out?
Yes, I think, you mentioned a great point there that, startups don't know how, especially if you're new to product. I'd say that the tip that I have is empathy, right? Like really doing a lot of listening. Because I've found it with myself too. Like the moment I say something, they'll either agree or disagree. But when I leave, the room relatively silent, that's where the insights really come into play, right? Like there are unexpected things that comes up all the time in these interviews. And as Lightster, one of the things that we want to resolve as well is making it more organic, making the process of talking to customers feel less like a research project, where you have to be ready with a script and ready with an agenda and like formally go through everything in the 1 hour that you have, but making it more organic, like as if you were just, showing your product to them and just, having a human conversation. I actually don't think that it needs to be much more complicated than that. But that is very much how the people in this space is looking at this problem right now. Is everyone that comes in is a research participant or a tester, and then the creators are a researcher. And so all the insights are then bound by those conditions and that kind of environment that they create.
So customer interviews on demand. Your website says, got a question, you mentioned it, just ask a live customer. Is the live customer on my website right now? Is it a website plugged in? Is it a chat group on your app? How does it work?
Yep. So essentially at the core of Lightster is what I would call a persona-based community. Essentially as a product manager, every product, every service targets a specific group of customers. And these group of customers have unique criteria, right, that you would want to screen for. And therefore, with these persona-based groups, people are automatically recruited and placed into these communities based on our unique matching algorithm that looks at things like, how relevant are they to the criteria that you've set as a creator? What was the length of time that you spent with people that are similar to them? And what were the ratings, of creators that have spoken to them? So a wide variety of different dimensions that we use to match and recommend a potential Lightster to a creator. And essentially, once you find them, you can then launch a chat with them or launch a video call or even share screen. Basically, that's what happens today already.
You have a community of people that you've got interests and all sort of demographic and psychographic information on. And I come along and say, all right, I need to talk to these type of entrepreneurs, like, because I'm startup coach versus say, I need to talk to this type of client, 20 to 30-year-old men or women or whatever, because I do this.
Yes.
Because I'm, and you surface a bunch and I can pretty much start communicating with them right away.
Yes, exactly. We also have a feature called live mode, which aims to eliminate the scheduling hassle with booking participants today, where as a member of these communities that we mentioned, if someone is available, they can actually indicate that they're live at that moment in time, and therefore no need to schedule time with them. Just click and call them right away. Imagine being able to, like during a brainstorming session, just being able to do that, just bring in the customer for 5 minutes.
Well, this is exactly what I'm thinking, as I coach people through growth hacking sessions and whatnot. And as we're trying to narrow down what we're going to test this week, what are the best ideas, it would be great to be able to call in a couple of customers and you may throw some stuff at them to get some feedback. You're saying you're paying by the minute. If you can jump right into it and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that?
Mm-hmm.
What would you prefer? Ask whatever and get 10 minutes, 20 minutes of 3 or 4 different people and you're out. That could really help your strategic direction quickly. And if you're only looking for, like I said, 5 minutes per person, you can get 4 or 5, be back on track and only have spent, by the sounds of it, $30 or $40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you look at the minimum wage, I mean, being able to make up to $60 an hour, I think is quite a compelling value proposition for anybody, right, during their spare time. So.
Yeah, it's a great value proposition on the other end. I think people would sign up for that fairly easily, especially because you're usually looking for consumers rather than someone with a specific skill set to help me with my calculus homework or something, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So you're just saying, hey, what do I like to buy or how do I feel about something is much easier than getting your brain into a completely different trying to teach mode or something. So, and being able to do that and make $60 an hour. Now, how do you go about getting the people, your community, the people who want to earn the $60 an hour?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I've already started recruiting them. And right now we've got about 130 people who have signed up already through our pre-launch sign-up offer. We are attracting them through offering partnerships with local businesses. So for example, right now we have a standing offer with Maya Bay Toronto, where you can get 28% off your takeout order if you sign up for Lightster. So that's one way to kind of get people coming in. On the other hand, I think the first ideal group to target into is people who are already doing this, but on other platforms. And compared to those other platforms, Lightster would provide them a more consistent experience and more success at getting matched with a creator. I mean, there is a lot of friction with how participants are being treated today on other platforms, where, for example, you might answer a number of screening surveys, but you never know exactly where it goes, because there's always more screening processes after you've responded to those screener questions. However, with Lightster, if a creator is connected with you, you're guaranteed that you'll be connected with them, right? So you don't have to go through the same level of hassle. Another strategy that I have is what I would call a three-pronged approach. So I'm looking at product, marketing, and sales from specific focus segments. So for example, within the product, when I ask users to onboard and create profiles, I'm already tailoring those questions and those profiling attributes to the specific segment that we're starting with. And then I'm aligning the creators who I'm reaching out to from a sales perspective to the same segments that they're targeting, and trying to get Lightster on board. So an example would be, to give you an example, students, right? So, students are hungry for income, they're hungry to learn, they are a perfect, potential segment that I would target first to become a Lightster. On the other hand, there are education companies or companies that target students as their main or one of their main primary customer segments. So I'm reaching out to them at the same time and then making sure that the product has attributes that helps them match each other.
Yeah, I could see how this would be very useful in, enterprise all the way down to startups. So obviously put my startup hat on and think this is how, a very lean startup could grow, could test and reiterate time and time again while building your MVP or just your value prop even, and talk to customers in that process without, especially now, right? Because we can't just walk around campus and say, hey, do you have time to answer a couple of questions?
Yeah.
And so that leads me to the COVID question. Did you start this during COVID? And okay, yes. Okay, I was wondering if your value proposition has shifted at all, or it even just the need even increased more because it's even harder to physically get in front of these people, your target audience, get feedback from.
For sure, I would say COVID was a strong driver of my decision to leave my full-time job and finally get to building Lightster. And actually, we just started this past May. So it's only been really 6 weeks into Lightster. But I would say there are two things that I saw that came out of, and that we're seeing out of COVID. So one is the growth of entrepreneurship, right? Like everyone across the board is looking at job stability in a different way. And in fact, the stats prove it. Last year, entrepreneurship, like the number of new businesses have grown 40% in North America was the last stat that I looked at. So that creates more of a need for these new products going to market to validate with their customers. And on the other hand, because people are losing jobs, and finding that their jobs are not as stable as they imagined, the growth of side hustles have also, been out there, right? So, I mean, in North America, that number is around 35% of employed people have, a secondary source of income. And therefore, these two indicators were, basically catering to both sides of the platform that Lightster is catering to. On the one hand, there are going to be more creators out there. And on the other hand, there are going to be an increased number of people who are looking for more ways to earn in addition to their full-time gig.
It definitely sounds like a good value proposition on both sides of the equation on this. Now, when I'm interacting with someone, do I get, is it visual? Is it audio? Is it survey? Is it, can I get them to rate on a 1 to 10 clicking on stuff, or do I just have to write it down? How does it work?
I think in the beginning, first release, we definitely have to be more focused, and therefore, all the things that you mentioned are on the table in terms of the roadmap. But I think in the beginning, we want to focus on the human connection, and therefore, the first release will be about being able to launch a live call, and the participants can choose whether they're going to do it through voice, through video, through screen share, basically however they wish to engage. And then in the future, down the road, we plan to offer more ways that they can interact, whether it's doing polls, doing surveys, those types of things to complement the experience.
Now, what would you say is the benefit of doing something like live video interviews versus sending out a survey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best way to describe it is surveys provide you with data that helps understand the magnitude of the response. So for example, you can easily send a survey to 1,000 people and get back, A or B, right? A decision between both, but you'll never really know why and how they arrived at those decisions. And that is where, the live human interaction comes in, where it really tells you the human elements, even things like body language, right? Imagine showing someone a picture and looking at like whether they jumped or whether they, smirked. Those things are things that you don't get from a survey. And also the context of use, right? Like you could be sharing an idea, but without talking to them, you really don't know like what happens during their journey as they interact with whatever you're trying to sell. So I think, I'd say researchers always use both, quantitative and qualitative approaches to really maximize the insight.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's important to get those visual cues when you're doing an interview or getting the customer feedback. And it's the body language, it's the facial expressions, it's the hesitations. It's I remember I did some testing for 500 pixels way back when. And I came in and they just sat me down. They had a couple of people watching me, so it was a little bit weird. And they sit you in front of this big 27-inch screen and they say, okay, can you go and do this on our platform? And then, you go doing it. And then all of a sudden it's like, why the hesitation? Why do you have that frown? What like, and so which is, now they're trying to give us feedback. And that's great when you can get it over video, because then at least you're getting the raw stuff, not somebody's, okay, let me put whatever text in this box here or give you a rating and you don't really know why you got a 3 or why you got a 7. Because it could be that person's not interested in this or that, or photography or kittens or whatever it is you're asking about, right? So it's interesting that if you're getting in live, you can really find out, is this my target demographic? What is the feedback? What's happening right away? And at $1 a minute, it sounds like too cheap.
I think that's something that I'll continue to validate as well, to see what the market thinks about the pricing, and how people actually use the platform. I've definitely, you're not the first one that mentioned that it sounds too cheap, but the idea is really to just bring down the barriers in whatever way possible, and that's kind of my hypothesis right now.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on who you're talking to. I think you'd be when you're talking to people like me, it's $1 a minute. We're talking to people who would use the service, it's $1 a minute. When you're talking to investors, it's $60 an hour.
There you go.
From just because the brain works differently. All right, because now I can do math on $60 rather. You're selling $60 units versus dollar units.
Right.
And they can put their brain around that a little bit, and also see. I think though, when you look at it, it's an amazing value proposition, because I've done these before where I've set up focus groups. You get a whole bunch of people in the room, you order pizza, or you interview people one-on-one, bring them in time after that. And it's expensive and time consuming. Like if you're doing the one-on-one interviews, then you've got to bring people wherever you physically have to be, or now we can do more things via digitally, but lining them up, scheduling it, getting everybody to do the interviews whenever, and then a week later trying, because it took you that long to schedule them all, or getting everyone the hassle of driving and being physically in the same room together and scheduling all that. This takes away all of that. There's a huge amount of cost and work involved in that. So I think that there's some great value here. I'm not questioning your business model, but I think there might be some room to move on, maybe as a company. I want to offer different incentives other than $1 an hour.
That's great feedback. Yeah, definitely.
And I think that might be an option for, the business side. They don't have to be, but for example, maybe I want to offer that and product.
Yes. Like an early access, kind of offer, or, free usage, free trial, those types of things. Yep.
Yeah, but also if I'm working with a few people and I'm getting some feedback, great, got some feedback. I want to try and get the same feedback a couple stages down the road. Now I'm going to release a consumer packaged good product. I'd like to send it to a couple of people. So you know what? It's not only $1 an hour, but if you spend 10 minutes, I'm going to send you the product because I'm going to bug you. What do you think about it? Unboxing and do it again. So I think there's some other value potential around that from a business point of view to extend that model, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. Definitely writing that down.
It's hard. I know we're doing an interview. It's hard to me not to have the startup coach model that says these kinds of things could work really well. So right now, who are you going after as your ideal client, or who are you thinking as your ideal client?
Yep, I think that, from all the 50, potential customers that I've spoken to, I've really narrowed down, early adopters to basically product managers in high-tech companies who work in weekly or bi-weekly sprints. And the reason why that is important is that these are the people who needs the most touch points with their customers and who are already recognizing the value of doing so. Comparing that to an enterprise company where, they do quarterly or biannual planning cycles. I mean, they don't really need an ad hoc or a non-demand solution because they don't have the ability to pivot, their decisions and their models, at that cadence anyways. But these startups or high-tech companies who work in sprints, they need to make decisions about the products and services pretty much on a daily basis. And today, they're making a lot of assumptions around their customers because, they don't have a way to do it on demand.
I think you'll find that more and more enterprises will be interested because they're developing lean practices in specific areas of their company. A specific group here, specific group there, specific group there. There are a lot of those in big companies, and I don't want to tell tales out of school, but I did a project with Lego, a huge multi-billion-dollar company, but they had a little team working on this really innovative solution, and they were testing out a bunch of stuff. And that's great and they were interested in it, and so they might jump on something like this. So I think you'll find there's pockets of people in enterprise that will be all over this because it's really cost efficient, and you can get the turnaround time is incredibly fast.
That's great feedback as well. Yeah.
Because you go into enterprise, how long do they do customer interviews? I'm just saying that maybe on a second business model after you got your launch and everything's going, you think about an enterprise package and what you can do as a focus group versus they can do in the time frame, and what a package like that might look like.
Yeah, you're right. Even when I worked at RBC, or one of the banks, I mean, there were always the more traditional parts of the company, and then there were always more like the innovation and solution acceleration parts of the business where they would be, early adopters to these types of new ways to work and collaborate. For sure, that's a great point.
It's funny, banks are the worst when it comes to they have their own silos everywhere. This is what it is. They're all different. Yeah. I did a lot of implementation, software implementations for banks with different groups, and it's very interesting how you think of them as one brand and they kind of act like different companies inside.
Yeah, and then you go to your colleague's desk and you're like, what? You have access to that software? Like, I've been trying to get approval for a while.
And a lot of other companies are similar, but Bell was very similar. They're all very disparate companies under one roof. But it's that's where you can find some integration in enterprise, obviously, for this kind of stuff, and the value there, because people are, Bell, great company, financial institutions, great company, where they're going to be like, oh, we'd love to talk to a few customers, people about this. Mm-hmm. The project team gets around, they talk to 10 people, spend a couple hours doing it. And that really helps get some quotes, get some customer feedback when they're pitching it later. When we do startup weekends and stuff, we find the people who win are the people who get more than 100 feedback from people, from either surveys or going out and talking and whatnot, because they really talk to their clients. So there is really value here that I just hope people are understanding.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
And is there a business model outside of the $60 an hour, which I assume your business model looks like you just take a percentage of that?
Yeah. So at the beginning, that's certainly going to be our focus. We have also thought about a subscription model, where, in your example, an enterprise can buy a certain number of credits per month and subscribe based on a certain number of dollars per month, and then their teams can have access to the credits so that individually they don't have to, swipe the credit card each time. We've also thought about an advertisement model, because over time we're going to build an audience on both the creator side and the participant side, and we're going to have tremendous data about both of them. And so I think that, advertisers like business, solutions and products and services can target the creators, and then, consumer product and services companies can then also target advertisements or special offers to the creators, to the Lightster side of things. So, but we have to be careful, not to make the experience, convoluted with ads again. And I think it's got to be aligned to our vision and what we're trying to do at Lightster, and therefore we're going to make them, very, very tailored to the interests of both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a role for ads here, especially when you're talking about feedback on ads. As a company, I'm about to roll out a multi-million-dollar campaign, or as a startup, I'm about to spend $50,000 on the campaign. It's my last $50,000. So maybe I want to get some feedback on, what color or which thing might gets a better impression first. So not only advertising to them, but, getting out feedback for ads, right? It's just all part of the process at an incredibly, like, the usefulness of this is seems like for almost anything, almost anyone. This is why for a handful of dollars you can get some feedback. Especially I talk to startups all the time. They always ask me, where can I talk to customers? Where can I do this? Where can I do that? And they don't have a lot of dollars. So I'm really glad we're talking today. I'm going to be following you and like to know when everything's launched, because I'm sure there's a lot of startup would be interested in using the service. Now, everyone talks about hustle. You haven't quite launched that, but you're building your early access platform. How are you getting your traction and building your audience?
I think it starts with just putting myself out there and putting the the idea and the concept out there. And so just, after the first week of working on the idea, I posted the website up. I've started to reach out proactively in various channels to creators and potential Lightsters and participants, and just getting really, really early feedback on the idea and the concepts. I mean, I have a design prototype that I typically walk them through. And I'd be quite honest, like every single week we've pivoted on something. And so I think it's been really, really eye-opening, kind of the value of just being really, really close to the market. And I think, the second part here is really about just having clear goals, right? So each week, me and my co-founder, we set really, really clear goals on what we want to achieve. In terms of numbers and metrics. So for example, how many signups do we want to gain this week? How much do we want to increase that by next week? And I think that's really helped me, at least personally, to even stay sane. Because some days I wake up and, I always tell my parents, it's depressing, to wake up and finding that you don't really have much ground. And I think having clear goals and achieving those goals as we go, it's really helped, stay relevant and stay sane, that we are in fact making progress towards that, million-mile step, right?
It's funny. I had, I think it was one of the founders of Teleport who said that entrepreneurs must have a manic self delayed gratification, knowing that I'm working on this, but I'm not going to see results for 2 years, versus, that this delayed gratification for what you're working on and the blood, sweat, and tears can be very frustrating. But to know that there's that pot of gold at the end, or that product or that business, it takes a lot to go through, and you have to have a certain mental state to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, yeah, it helps to stay focused on the goal, the 2 years, 3 years down the road goal, and just know that you're making strides towards that. I think that's really the hustle.
Okay, we've got a comment on here from Isaac saying Pat is a great product person. Thanks, Isaac. Great feedback. You mentioned your co-founders. Finding the right co-founders or the first key team members can be crucial. And I don't know how many times I've had founders come and talk to me and say, we've got this third co-founder who really, isn't doing this or isn't doing that. Can you tell me how you met and, what led you to the conclusion that this is someone I can trust and work with?
Yeah, so I mean, my co-founder, I think he's on the call as well. That's Wood. I mean, I've known him for 7 years, and when we met, I mean, we didn't never really had an agenda. We were just hanging out, with our group of friends, and then he eventually, we went separate ways. He went back home to Thailand, and I stayed here and stuck around. But it was actually a coincidence because I actually first reached out to him. He runs a software development shop in Thailand. So I actually first reached out to him and be like, "Hey, do you want to develop my MVP?" And that's where the conversation started. We went into deep discussions about the idea and the product, the market, the customers, and eventually we just ended up asking each other, "Hey, do you want to join?" And then one day he asked me like, "Hey, can I join?" And it just became kind of organic from that standpoint. But for me, like you mentioned, like I've had my fair share of trial and error with co-founders as well in the past. I mean, when I was in Waterloo back in 2011, I was with another, classmate trying to find, build a website to find free food on campus. But I found that, I think what's important in a co-founder is really making sure that you have complementary skill sets. At least that's from kind of my own experience, because otherwise you're ending up, kind of spending time on the same things and debating about them, whether you're going to go approach A or approach B. But if you have complementary skill sets, the division is a lot more clear, and you're less likely to collide on the same things or the same approaches. And one other thing that I really appreciate about my co-founder is his business acumen. I think that is really important for me. When looking for a technical co-founder, like you want them to actually be a co-founder, not just a technologist or someone who knows tech, right? But the business acumen, I think anyone can have, but it's very hard to find, right? Because as you're building tech, like you got to know and have that hunch that like, wait a minute, why are we doing it this way? What's the value for doing it this way or spending this much time? And that's been kind of what I really appreciated about our working relationship is we were always challenging each other. I ask questions about the technical side of things, and he always asks me questions about product and design, and pushes me to think about, why are we doing things in a certain way.
I like to share both success and failure, so there's a chance that others won't make the same mistake. Can you tell us a time where you screwed up or made the wrong pivot or startup decision?
I think, committing to your idea too early on, I think is a failure that I've certainly experienced myself. Like, I mean, if of course, everyone has great ideas, but if you're too committed to it that you're not willing to change or tweak it as you go, I think you're gonna have a tough battle with the market, right, to try to find product market fit. So for me, I've certainly tried to push a square peg in a round hole several times before. I've tried doing solutions, in the healthcare industry, for example, and I just didn't understand it enough, right? And I just had a vision, but I really didn't understand the problems. I didn't understand the customers. And so for me, I've now resorted to the advice that I hear around me is just spend time on things that you know really, really well, and things that you have a network around as well. I think for me, those have been like really, really kind of like things that are pushing me towards Lightster and giving me joy and passion in it. Is I know it well, I know the problem, and I have hundreds of people that I can speak to in my network already about it and who can give me feedback and advice on it.
Yeah, it's a quote from Dr. Sean Wise, who we have on regularly, that sorry, I had a little spill here. from 100 steps to startup, and I lost my train of thought there, but that you want to be part of the customer segment that you're going after. So it's great advice that you're in there, you know the problem, and being part of that community. Like if you're starting out early and you're at the idea stage, you want to be part of that customer segment that you're going after. And it's great to have that understanding of that problem.
Mhm.
Do you have any tips for founders just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, again, I know, by no means have achieved success on, by myself, but I mean, things that I can share some observations that I've found to work well to at least get me up in the morning and kind of, pushing things along. The first thing is really, even if you feel unprepared or you feel insecure about both yourself and your product, still put yourself out there anyways. Like, no one is really judging you other than the market, right? Like you don't really need to care about any other kinds of judgment or other people. Just let the market decide whether or not your idea is going to stick. And that's been quite the journey for me personally as well, because I mean, I've made a mark in the corporate world, climbing up the ladder and, building teams. And I always felt like I know things, right? And it's been really hard to kind of just let go of everything and just, go against, what you typically would do if you were working in a corporate or a more stable environment. The second piece is around talking to people. I mentioned, after 6 weeks, I've spoken to about 50 people about Lightster, and sometimes it's just getting connected or reconnected with past colleagues, and I find that really helps me not feel like I'm in this alone, because as you talk to people, they share their experiences, you relate to them, they relate to you, and you really just you stay sane and keep moving forward. And then the last point I would say is just be humble. Throughout all of this journey, just be as humble as you can with everything and anyone that you kind of run into. And I think that's going to allow you to really listen and observe what's going on around you, and then be able to adapt in a more agile and nimble way. So those are kind of the three things that I would say.
And I think it's great, getting out there and getting your idea out there and talking to many people as possible. That's only going to give you as much feedback as you can, building your network, your support network, to find out who can help you, and either mentally or actually with your with the startup itself, because sometimes you just need somebody to understand the troubles you're going through so that you could take the next step. But yeah, definitely building those things are great. All of that, and being humble. So when you're reaching out to people to build your network, and when you're talking about your startup and company, that you're not the center of the universe. Those are great advice for everyone. And if you follow that, I think you'll have some great success. So what is next for you and Lightster?
Yeah, so I mean, we are working on the MVP right now. So we under development. And we're looking to get into beta sometime in August or September. And we're already building momentum with our pre-launch signups, and trying to make things work the way that we work if we had a product, but trying to simulate it in kind of manual ways just to see if it's going to work. So if you sign up for early access today, you can already fill out your profile. We have our privacy policy up. So you can check that out as well. And I think that helps us, understand how we tweak the product to how you would actually use it as well. So we are in that stage. And yeah, please, if you're interested in Lightster, sign up for early access. We'll keep you posted on our progress. And if you are interested in giving feedback, you will likely hear from me. But if not, please let me know as well. I'm always looking for people to speak to.
Yeah, that's great. And we want to have you back on when you get it out there, so we can tell the startups that they can go and start using this product, whether that's, early access launch August, September, or a little after that. You let me know, because I think there's a lot of community that could really use this product. So where do people go to find out more? On social media, your website? Where are you?
Yep, we're on all the major channels. You can find us through just searching for Lightster. You can sign up for early access on our website, lightster.co. Yeah, it's pretty easy from there.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, Pat, to talk about, the value of customer interviews and what you're doing with Lightster. Our audience appreciates getting that information, and I hope you have some great success, because startups could always use this. Customer interviews on tap for $1 a minute. It's a no-brainer. Everybody should be signing up. Thank you very much for taking your time today. Lightster.co.
Thanks, Craig. It's been a joy speaking to you, and thanks for your feedback. I've definitely wrote down the notes, and we'll be thinking about them. Thank you so much.
We'll talk again soon.